Friends, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be working on my second project for Elle Studio this month. If you didn't see the first one, I am guest designing for Elle Studio, and just the products this month are so good, you guys. They're so good. So I made a 9x12 and a 6x12 pocket page spread for my first project, and for my second project I'm actually going to make a layout. So I was super inspired by the cut files that were available. They're these like sweetheart like sweethearts, like the candies you used to get when you were younger that were horrifying but we ate anyway, those. So what I did was I pulled out, I have my box of goodies here so I can find everything. I used the 6x8.25, never mind, I can't get to it. The 6x8.25 Love Is paper pad, and I pulled out the pink paper and a red paper. I wanted papers that were more of a solid background to cut the cut files out of, and then I cut it again on vellum just so I can layer it over the top. So it's gonna look like that. So it's gonna be kind of like muted, and then I have a photo of Minerva on my lap, and I'm just gonna be scrapbooking about how much I love that crazy cat, even though she makes me want to like choke her some days, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to stop talking, do the same thing like I did last time, put this part on fast forward and voice over it, and we are going to get to work. So I will see you at the end. Hi crafty friends, so welcome back. So here what I've started doing is like I showed you in my intro, I had those vellum sweethearts cut out from the same cut file that I cut the colored ones out of, and I'm just stapling it. I used a tiny bit of that vellum safe adhesive, and then I stapled it with my tiny attacher, and I'll have all the supplies I used linked in the description box if you want to get your hands on any of the stuff I used. And then I did the same thing with the pink paper, and then for the background, oh my god, I had so much fun doing this. So what I wanted to do was two things. Because my first layout for Elle Studio felt very blue and green, I wanted to highlight some of the other colors in the January kits. And that's one of my favorite things about Elle Studio, is that there are so many like moods and color schemes in each kit that if you wanted to pull out all the green tones, you could do that. You could pull out all the blues, you could do a rainbow spread. And since I was talking about how much I love my sweet girl, I decided to do a red and pink spread. So I went through and I pulled out some of the 6x8 papers that I thought would be fun to make a background for, and all I did was I tore the papers across the top and layered them. If you've watched me scrapbook before, this technique will look really familiar because this is one of my favorite things to do to add top interest to a background, because it's really easy. You just tear off a few pieces of paper and then you stick it down. And because these papers are 8.5 and my layout is 9 inches wide, you see I had to rip the wood green paper, the first one, I had to rip it off so it looks like it stopped at an angle, since it's a little bit more narrow than the pages. But once I layered the other papers behind it, you can't even tell that each paper is a little bit more narrow than the pages. It worked out so well. It was such a good effect. So if you decide to do something like this, just make sure you have a sharp point at the ends of your papers, and then you can blend in. You can even do this with like 6-inch papers that are 6 inches wide. Same thing, just make sure you leave yourself a sharp point at the end and it blends in perfectly. So I went in and I stuck all those papers to each other, and then I stuck them down, and then I stitched on a background. And you guys, if I tell you what my sewing machine put me through to get this background done, through the magic of editing, you don't have to watch, but it took me maybe a half hour to just stitch this zigzag background, because first my bobbin thread ran out, so I had to refill my bobbin, and then my sewing machine was literally doing everything it could possibly think of to torture me. But I was victorious, and we had that fun red zigzag stitching. I went with the red thread because there's so much red in this layout, and I thought it would just be a fun like border to add. I like using, so full disclosure, I do not know how to sew. I can barely use my sewing machine to stitch on paper, but it doesn't take a genius to stitch in a straight line, which I guess it does, because I still didn't do it for this layout, but I got pretty close, and the zigzag stitch hides all flaws, and so I added that fun zigzag. Now what I'm doing is layering my photo with all the papers, and I did I added a torn edge to all my paper layers because there was that torn edge in the papers that I used on top. And again, I say this all the time, my favorite thing to do with scrapbooking is to repeat elements. So that doesn't always mean repeat colors or repeat die cuts or shapes. It also means repeating textures. And since I had that ripped element on the top of the page, it just felt like a really fun way to repeat texture by adding a torn element to my photo. And since I used 4 photo mats, for each photo mat, I just ripped one of the edges and left the other 3 edges clean so that it's not like it's a contained mess, if that makes sense. Like it's a contained mess. And now what I'm going to do is work on a journaling spot. And since the stamps in this month's kit were so much fun, I had to give stamping a try. Now, if you've watched me scrapbook before, you know that stamping is not my thing. I pretend to stamp, but the Elle Studio stamps were way too much fun to not mess around with them. And this wood grain 3x4 tag was perfect for adding some journaling. So I pulled out my Misty, I crossed my fingers, and I prayed. And I have these tiny little chalk inks. These are First and Magic chalk inks. If I can find them on Amazon, I'll link them in the description. These are like my favorite. They're my favorite inks because you can write on top of them, and they're pigment inks. I think they're pigment inks, don't quote me. They're pigment inks versus like the archival inks, which are more like dye inks. And the Misty made it a snap to stamp down because like you'll see that pink heart that I used, I had to stamp it more than once to get a good impression because the stamps are new and the pink ink that I was using was super light. So I just stamped it more than once. I think I stamped it 3 times, and the Misty makes it so easy to restamp. Like my friend that sent me the Misty, she has no idea how much she saved my life and made my scrapbooking so much better. So I stamped the 2 hearts, the red and the pink heart, over top each other, and then I stamped a pink banner in the top, and then I stamped "Loving This So Much" in red underneath it. And then I did my journaling. Now, learn from my mistakes. I did not heat set my chalk ink. You cannot write on chalk ink unless you let it dry first. So I ended up starting my journaling, and then my pen started skipping over the chalk ink, and it never occurred to me that it was just because the ink was wet. So I switched pens, and then that pen started skipping, and then I realized that it was because the ink is wet. So you'll see in like the up close photos, my journaling is in 2 different colors, but it just says, "Minerva is the definition of a lap cat. She always has to be as close to me as possible, and that means crawling into our laps whenever she thinks there's space for her. So thankful for her and for the way she loves us and for the company and for the constant purring." And it was just a little note about having Minnie in my lap all the time. She's my favorite. So again, if you decide to do any stamping with chalk ink, please let it dry. Please heat set it before you write on it. Learn from my mistakes. So now I'm just working on embellishing the layout. Like all the hard stuff's done. I have my journaling tag ready. I had my title die cut from the same papers that I cut out the hearts. And I just pulled out the stuff from the kit. So I used the Love You die cut pack, which has all the labels that I used on my first layout for Elle Studio. I grabbed a bunch of the hearts, an orange one and a red one. I just thought pulling an orange would be fun because it's close enough to the pink and the red, and most of the layout is warm toned anyway, so I thought I could just sneak that orange in there even though it's not anywhere else in the layout. And then I just go to work on building my cluster. So I add those hearts. You'll see that I move that heart around a bunch of times because I just couldn't decide where I wanted it to be. And then I took a orange banner, just to repeat that orange color, added that red pleather sticker on top. It says "Love Documented." And then I added a label sticker to that pink label that says "Best Buds." And you see I move it around a lot. Like I thought I wanted to put it on top next to the red label just to repeat that label shape, and then I moved it behind the paper, and I didn't like it there either. And I just keep moving it around back and forth until I figure out where to put it, and it eventually goes on the bottom right of my photo, and it's perfect. That pop of pink is perfect. And then I add a gray pleather sticker that says "Happy Dance," just to repeat the gray color that's in the ripped paper layers at the top of my layout. Again, I just like repeating colors, and there was nothing else gray on the page, and so adding that pleather sticker just makes the gray look like it was intentional and not like a color that I added and I forgot about. Again, now I'm moving around the hearts because I still can't decide where I want to go. And then I add another one of the die cuts from the embellishment pack. And this one just says the best parts. And then I go ahead and stick down my title. Now, again, I'll link everything in the description box. I just use glue in my fine line bottle to stick down my title. It is my go-to way of sticking things. I love that fine line bottle. And there's just Scotch quick dry glue. And after this, I add some puffy hearts all around the layout and I call it done. And so I hope you enjoyed this layout. I hope you are inspired to give some of these techniques a try. 9x12 scrapbooking, you guys, might be my go-to size this year. I was really worried that I wouldn't know what to do with the rectangle size when I'm so used to scrapping with squares, but it is so much fun to try something new and to kind of stretch your creative muscles. So I hope you enjoyed this layout. I'm so grateful to Elle Studio for letting me be their guest designer this month. I have one more project to share with you that I'll be sharing next Monday. And I hope you come back to see what I'm up to. So there'll be still photos after I stick down all these stickers so you can see close-ups. And I hope you give this I hope you give this video a like, a comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed hanging out with me. Till next time, keep it crafty, friends, and have the best day, and I will see you around. Bye!